The NBA just witnessed the most chaotic free agency period in decades, and if you think you know what happened, think again. What started as a typical summer of player movement turned into an absolute bloodbath that left championship contenders in ruins and bottom-feeder teams suddenly looking like title threats. The moves that went down this week didn't just shake up the league, they completely rewrote the championship landscape for the next 5 years. The salary cap jumped a massive 10% to over $154 million, creating a feeding frenzy unlike anything we've seen before. But money wasn't the only thing flying around. Loyalty meant nothing. Championship cores got dismantled overnight, and some of the biggest names in basketball found themselves in situations nobody could have predicted just a week ago. The ripple effects from these moves are still being felt, and honestly, some franchises might never recover from the decisions they made. Just when you thought the Milwaukee Bucks had figured it out, they dropped the most shocking news of free agency. Damian Lillard, the same player they traded everything for just 2 seasons ago, got waived using the stretch provision. Let that sink in for a second. They're literally paying him to go away, spreading his massive $113 million contract over the next several years just to get him off their books. This wasn't some mutual parting of ways either. The Bucks made this move specifically to create space for Miles Turner, who they signed to a 4-year, $107 million deal. Think about the desperation behind that decision. They essentially admitted that their championship window with Lillard was a complete failure, and they'd rather eat over $100 million in dead money than keep him around for another season. The stretch provision is brutal for teams because it means they're paying for past mistakes for years to come. Milwaukee will have Lillard's contract haunting their salary cap until the late 2020s, limiting their ability to sign other players while he's potentially helping another team win a championship. The timing couldn't be worse either, because Giannis Antetokounmpo is entering his prime years, and instead of surrounding him with talent, they're dealing with financial constraints created by their own poor decisions. What makes this even more shocking is how quickly things fell apart. Less than 2 years ago, Portland fans were devastated when Lillard forced his way out. Now Milwaukee is basically begging someone to take him, and Dame's reputation as a franchise player has taken a massive hit. The question everyone's asking is whether this move signals the beginning of the end for the Bucks' championship aspirations. While Milwaukee was making questionable decisions, the Los Angeles Lakers were making moves that either look genius or completely insane, depending on how you look at it. They scooped up DeAndre Ayton after Portland bought him out, signing him to a 2-year deal that'll pay him $34 million this season when you combine his buyout money with his new contract. Here's where it gets interesting. Ayton has been one of the most polarizing players in the league for years. He's got all the physical tools you want in a modern center, but his effort and consistency have been questioned everywhere he's played. Phoenix gave up on him despite drafting him first overall. Portland couldn't wait to get rid of him. Now the Lakers are betting that a change of scenery and playing alongside LeBron James will unlock whatever potential he has left. The pressure on this signing is enormous, because the Lakers are running out of time. LeBron just picked up his $52.6 million option, but everyone knows he's not getting any younger. Anthony Davis has been dealing with injuries for years, and their supporting cast has been inconsistent at best. If Ayton doesn't work out, they've essentially wasted another year of LeBron's career while paying him max money to underperform. But here's the thing that makes this move so fascinating. The Lakers have always been about making big swings, and Ayton represents exactly that kind of high-risk, high-reward gamble. If he stays healthy and motivated, he could be the missing piece that puts them back in championship contention. If he doesn't, they're stuck with another expensive player who doesn't move the needle, and their championship window might be officially closed. If you thought the Lillard situation was shocking, the Kevin Durant trade completely broke the internet. Phoenix sent one of the greatest players of all time to the Houston Rockets for Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, and the 10th pick in the draft. Let me repeat that. They traded Kevin Durant for a package centered around Jalen Green, a player who's been inconsistent at best during his young career. The Suns' decision to blow up their roster makes sense when you consider their financial situation, but the return they got for Durant has people questioning whether their front office knows what they're doing. Durant is still playing at an elite level, and even though he's getting older, he's the type of player who can single-handedly change a team's championship odds. Houston got him for what amounts to spare parts and a draft pick. This trade also reveals just how quickly things can fall apart in the NBA. Just a few years ago, the Suns were in the finals and looked like a dynasty in the making. They had Durant, Devin Booker, and what seemed like a championship-caliber roster. Now they're basically starting over, and their fans are left wondering how everything went wrong so fast. Houston's perspective on this trade is completely different. They've been rebuilding for years, accumulating young talent and draft picks, waiting for the right moment to strike. Getting Durant gives them instant credibility and a proven scorer who can mentor their young players while helping them compete for a playoff spot. The question is whether Durant still has enough left in the tank to make a real difference, or if Houston just gave up their future for a player whose best days are behind him. The Boston Celtics moves might be the most surprising of all, considering they were coming off a championship run. They traded away Junior Holiday to Portland and Kristaps Porzingis to Atlanta, completely dismantling the core that helped them win it all. This wasn't just a minor adjustment, this was a complete philosophical shift that nobody saw coming. Holiday was their defensive anchor and leadership presence, while Porzingis provided the stretch five capabilities that made their offense so dynamic. Getting rid of both players in the same offseason suggests the Celtics either have a master plan that we can't see yet, or they're making panic moves that could haunt them for years. The timing of these trades is particularly puzzling because the Celtics were still in their championship window. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are both in their prime, and they had the pieces around them to compete for multiple titles. Instead, they're basically starting over with a new supporting cast, hoping that their young stars can carry a heavier load. What makes this even more confusing is that neither Holiday nor Porzingis were demanding trades or causing locker room problems. These were productive players who fit well with the team's system and culture. The fact that Boston was willing to move them suggests they're either planning some major moves that haven't been announced yet, or they're trying to get younger and more athletic around their core players. While teams were making questionable trades, Oklahoma City Thunder made the smartest move of the entire free agency period by locking up Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with a 4-year, $285 million Supermax extension. This wasn't just a signing, it was a statement that the Thunder are ready to compete for championships and they're building around one of the best young players in the league. SGA has transformed from a promising young player into a legitimate MVP candidate, and his development has been the foundation of Oklahoma City's rapid rebuild. The Thunder went from being one of the worst teams in the league to a legitimate playoff contender in just a few years, and SGA's emergence as a superstar has been the driving force behind that transformation. The financial commitment is massive, but it's also necessary in today's NBA. Supermax contracts are designed to help small-market teams keep their stars, and Oklahoma City couldn't afford to let SGA hit free agency and potentially leave for a bigger market. The extension guarantees they'll have a franchise player for the next 5 years, giving them stability and a foundation to build around. This signing also puts pressure on other young stars around the league. Players like Luka Doncic and Jason Tatum are watching SGA get paid maximum money, and they're expecting the same type of commitment from their teams. The Supermax has become the new standard for elite players, and teams that can't or won't pay it are going to lose their best players to teams that will. The Michael Porter Jr. trade to Brooklyn might not have gotten as much attention as the Durant deal, but it's equally significant for both teams involved. Denver sent a key piece of their championship roster to the Nets for Cam Johnson, signaling that they're retooling rather than rebuilding, but also admitting that Porter Jr. wasn't the player they thought he could be. Porter Jr. has always been a polarizing player because of his injury history and inconsistent play, but he was still a key contributor on Denver's championship team. Trading him suggests the Nuggets are prioritizing durability and consistency over pure talent, which makes sense given their championship aspirations. Cam Johnson gives them a reliable shooter and defender who won't create the same headaches that Porter Jr. sometimes did. The Nuggets also made another move that flew under the radar, acquiring Jonas Valanciunas from Sacramento for Dario Saric. This trade gives them more depth at center and a proven veteran who can contribute immediately. Valanciunas isn't flashy, but he's exactly the type of player championship teams need, someone who can give quality minutes and won't hurt you when he's on the court. These moves show that Denver is still committed to winning now while Nikola Jokic is in his prime. They're not making dramatic changes to their core, but they're making smart adjustments that address their weaknesses and give them better depth. The question is whether these smaller moves will be enough to keep them competitive in an increasingly difficult Western Conference. Even with all the major moves that have already happened, there are still several big names who haven't signed anywhere, and their decisions could reshape the league even further. Damian Lillard is now available after being waived by Milwaukee, and every contending team should be interested in adding a player of his caliber, even if he comes with some baggage. The Lillard situation is particularly interesting because he's no longer the same player who demanded a trade from Portland. His value has taken a hit after the Milwaukee experiment failed, which means he might have to accept a smaller role and less money than he's used to. Teams are probably worried about his age and whether he can still be effective as a primary option, but his shooting and leadership could be valuable for the right situation. Jonathan Kuminga and Quentin Grimes are two of the most intriguing young players still available, and their decisions will impact their team's futures significantly. Both players are entering crucial years in their careers, and where they sign could determine whether they develop into stars or remain role players. Chris Paul is another veteran who's still looking for a home, and his experience could be valuable for a young team looking to make a playoff push. Paul isn't the same player he was 5 years ago, but he's still one of the smartest players in the league and could be a mentor for younger players while contributing on the court. When the dust settles from this chaotic free agency period, the championship landscape looks completely different from what it was just a week ago. The traditional powerhouses like the Lakers and Celtics have made questionable moves that could either pay off big or backfire spectacularly. Meanwhile, teams like Houston and Oklahoma City have positioned themselves as legitimate contenders for years to come. The most fascinating aspect of this free agency period is how it's highlighted the importance of front office decision-making in the modern NBA. Teams that have been smart with their moves, like the Thunder, are reaping the benefits of patient rebuilding and smart player development. Teams that have made desperate moves, like the Bucks with Lillard, are paying the price for poor decision-making. The financial implications of these moves will be felt for years to come. Teams are committing hundreds of millions of dollars to players based on potential rather than proven performance, and some of these contracts are going to age very poorly. The salary cap increase has created opportunities for teams to spend more money, but it's also created opportunities for teams to make bigger mistakes. Looking ahead, the teams that have been smart with their moves this summer are going to have significant advantages over teams that have made questionable decisions. The NBA is increasingly becoming a league where front office competence is just as important as player talent, and this free agency period has been a perfect example of that reality. The championship race is wide open, but the teams that have positioned themselves best for the future are the ones that made smart, calculated moves rather than desperate gambles.